Shana Tova. Natalie, Joshua, and Naomi, join me in wishing you a year filled with good health, a renewed sense of purpose, and abundant love. This year, I will be celebrating 20 years as a rabbi, and for 17 of these years, I've had the privilege of sharing words with you at this Yizkor moment. It is indeed a challenge to find the right words which will help you to remember, the right words to bring you strength and comfort and hope, and the right words to shine a light in the darkness. I've walked beside many of you as you have entered into the valley of the shadow of death. For some, the entry into the valley was slow, like trying to watch the big hand on the old wall clock, trying to watch it move. And for some, the descent into darkness was so fast that the shock and the upheaval clouds the rest of reality. I've been with you, like your other rabbis and the cantors and your friends, in the hospital, in the living room, in the chapel, at graveside, and then back again in your home during the mingled and complex mixing of tears and laughter, guilt and relief, gratitude and grief. We all experience loss. Some losses are profound, and some are not. Recently, I lost my rabbi's manual. It's not a big crisis. In fact, it's not a crisis at all. I guess, like the commercial, I'm concerned about never leaving home without it. So, I have a backup one in my office, and an extra one in my car, and one in my home. But the one with 20 years worth of notes scribbled on little Post-its, it's always in my briefcase. Unless, of course, it's not. And I left it someplace else, like in my office or at home or in the car. It's been pointed out to me a number of times that the concept of a rabbi's manual is a bit strange. Someone once said to me, "You mean you went to 9 years of undergraduate school and 5 years of rabbinic school and 3 more years to get your doctorate, and everything you need to know is in that little blue manual?" The rabbi's manual has in it prayers and blessings that the rabbis use most frequently. And I must say that losing 20 years of notes is a bit of a distressing experience, although not quite as distressing as the time about 10 years ago when I was sitting with Cantor Haas in the parking lot at Mount Nebo Kendall, and about 5 minutes before the funeral I was going to officiate at, I realized I had left my carefully prepared eulogy on my desk back at the office. But even when I have not left a eulogy behind or misplaced my manual, I am constantly searching for the right words to illuminate the darkness. I have been blessed a few times to say exactly the right thing at exactly the right time. And as some of you know, sometimes, like all of us, I am unable to deal with my own discomfort, and I say the wrong thing at the wrong time. I'm not just talking about when I pronounced your mother's name Ellen when it was clearly spelled Helen, or when I called you up and asked you how you're dealing with your grandmother's death, forgetting that rarely is a grandmother named Ben. These are mistakes of distraction and carelessness. More painful yet are the times when the words I've spoken have missed the mark and in fact have been meaningless or insensitive. For these times and words, I apologize. The darkness that accompanies grief and mourning can be, or should I say, is uncomfortable. So what should we say? I'm constantly amazed by the wisdom of our ancestors. It says in Pirkei Avot, V'al techameni b'sha'ah shemeto mutal lifanav. Do not comfort your friend while his dead lie before him. The words of this text are powerful and yet counterintuitive. We so want to comfort and console others as well. When we are in pain, we so want to be comforted and consoled. And yet, in the midst of the shadow of loss, we don't really know what to say, and it is virtually impossible to hear what others are saying to us. It is so difficult to remember that words don't comfort people. Rather, people comfort people. Let me say it again. People comfort people. We all know that there is a time to speak and a time to keep silent. Of course, figuring out which is when is not so easy. Rabbi Joseph Telushkin teaches, it's not about the effort, but rather about the timing. Even now, as I speak, I understand the compulsion to make the pain go away. I really do. I am ambivalent about talking, about not talking. Rabbi Harold Kushner beautifully says that the fear of the unknown is what makes grief so difficult. He teaches that one of the ways that we deal with fear is to give it a good long lecture. I remember shortly after coming to Miami Beach, getting the call that no one wants to make and no one wants to receive. A 3-month-old baby had died. I got in the car to go to the home of the family. On the way, I called one of my rabbinic colleagues in California for some help. I wasn't sure what to say. I asked him, "What would you say?" He said, what would you say when you walked in the house?" There was silence on the other end of the phone. I thought we'd been disconnected. I asked him again, and he paused again. "You're not listening to me." "But what if they..." He interrupted me. "You're still not listening, but listen." He said, "Don't think that your hot air can fill a deflated soul. You're entering into the whirlwind of chaos, and out of that darkness, if you quietly point the way without getting in the way..." And then again he paused and continued, "Out of their darkness, they will find light." And then, like the mentor master my friend is, he stopped talking. Find light. I like that. I say it to myself often. But oh, how we want to fill that silence. There are books, articles, and websites devoted to things we shouldn't say to those who are in mourning. The list is long. Let me share but just a couple. Perhaps these are all too familiar. We do not help anyone when we say, "You'll get through it, be strong. She's in a better place. God must have wanted her because she was such a good person." It doesn't help when we say, "I guess it was his time to go." It doesn't help when we say, "Everything happens for a reason." Don't say these things. Resist the urge. I know it's hard to do. We are Jews. We talk about tikkun olam, healing and fixing the world. But sometimes we have to resist the urge. It's entirely natural to want to make the pain of loss disappear. But remember, words don't comfort people. People comfort people. Earlier this year, I said to one of our congregants, with the best of intentions, a phrase that is not on the worst thing to say list. In fact, it's actually on the list of things to say when you just can't stop yourself from talking. I said, "What can I do to help?" And he responded, "Can you come over and clean my garage?" Now, I'm happy to clean people's garages. What I would do for a garage. But, in fact, I would trade most anything for a garage. But I wouldn't trade anything for this person's surus. So about a week later, I called someone else and I said, "What can I do to help?" And this one must have talked to the other person. And he replied, "Can you come over to my house and change a few light bulbs?" I would gladly spend my rabbinate changing light bulbs. In fact, in some ways, I think that's what I get the privilege of doing as a rabbi, is changing light bulbs. And I know many of you would join me and do join me all the time. Bringing light in times of darkness is how we comfort. My father, his memory is a blessing, was an extraordinary light bulb changer. He was the president of his 24-unit homeowners association in Century Village in West Palm. I don't know why. He liked it. He complained about it all the time. He didn't enjoy contracting with the elevator company. He was not happy about collecting the dues. But whenever someone needed their light bulb changed or a door handle fixed, he was there in a flash. I once asked him why he liked being the president. He told me that when he gets called to change a light bulb, it's really just an excuse to listen to people's stories. When my father died 8 years ago, 2 of my childhood friends called me, and I had just spoken to them within the last 3 or 4 weeks before my father died. And coincidentally, I had talked to them because both of their mothers had died. And when they called to comfort me, neither of them mentioned their pain or their sadness. Not once in their call to me did they mention their mother. I talked and they listened. I told them stories about my father and they listened, just like my father used to do. And in so doing, without saying a word, they comforted me and helped me to remember and to see the light that exists beyond the darkness. Some things are said better not with our words, but with our deeds, which I believe is the reason why that when mourners come home from the funeral, the custom is to light a Shiva candle that burns for a whole week. And 4 times a year on the festivals, when we recite Yizkor, we light a candle. And on the anniversary of our loved one's death, we light a yahrzeit light, a candle. If I asked you what the blessing is before we light Shabbat candles, most of you could tell me that blessing. And if I asked you what the blessing is before we light Hanukkah candles, you could probably sing it, even with the correct melody. But if I ask you what the blessing is before lighting the Shiva candle, or the blessing before the Yizkor candle, or the blessing before the Yartzeit candle, most of us would have a hard time reciting it. And the reason we can't remember is not because we say it so rarely, but because there is no blessing. There are no words. Why? Because sometimes light speaks louder than words. Sometimes light speaks louder than words. Think about it. In the face of darkness, we stop and silently strike a match. When we're at that most difficult, vulnerable moment, that real darkness, we silently strike a match and we create light. We affirm life. And it's not just wax and a wick. It is a reminder, a bright reminder, to surround ourselves with memories, friends, and love. The small flickering flame is a reminder that when someone we love dies, our relationship doesn't disappear. Rather, it changes. Rebuilding our lives without the person we love is no easy task. Judy Weiselman, who's been running our bereavement groups for the last number of years, she reminded me that rebuilding our lives is so very difficult because it demands that we rebuild our identity. And so, slowly, like a flickering flame, we move from grief to gratitude, from mourning to memory, and from darkness to light. And when we change our lives, when we live with renewed passion and renewed fullness, we honor our loved ones. And just as importantly, we honor ourselves and we love ourselves. Loving ourselves. It is a process, an ongoing transformation of the soul. It is okay to grieve. It is necessary. And it is also okay to laugh, to play, to rejoice, and to love, and to find light. Dear friends, this is Yizkor. In the quiet of this afternoon, we gather together with our friends. And once again, we remember to peer past the silent unknown toward renewed courage, fresh hope, and enduring love. We remember our mothers, our fathers, our grandparents, our wives, our husbands, brothers, sisters, our sons, our daughters, our lovers, and our friends. May your precious memories be a blessing and a sacred reminder to love life and to love yourself. May you find light in the year ahead.